there, I'm a mother of two and I have one hypoplastic left heart syndrome child or half a heart syndrome, and on this channel I want to take you along the journey I had so far with him. And basically the topic for today, as you already have read, is his second reanimation that occurred shortly after his second operation. Okay, I'm just going to start with the day, the beginning of the day, because I went into the ICU and he laid there. He was still unconscious and he was intubated, but I noticed that he started moving quite a lot. For me that was a warning sign, because I think it was 2 days prior he already started moving a little bit, and at that point he also started breathing against his tube, and his state deteriorated, but the nurses caught it early enough, put him a little bit more under, so he stopped breathing against the tube. So for me at that point, warning sign, he's more alert, something bad might happen, just look at him and be careful. Yeah, nothing too special basically, but just my instincts telling me to be careful. Sorry. Yes, the other noticeable thing was there was one other child in our ICU room, and yeah, it was one other, and just before lunch a nurse came in and told us we had to leave in about 10 minutes because they are getting an emergency, and they started moving the other child and they left mine in the room with whatever emergency would come in. That's totally acceptable that was totally acceptable for me, and there were two other things where the parents would be complimented outside, and that would be if the shift changed, so if the nurses would tell each other about the medical details of every child, or if they would do another medical procedure so the parents wouldn't interfere with anything. So I was okay with it, but I remembered I have to tell the nurses he's more alert so they can keep an eye on him. But of course, when you set yourself up for something like that, you forget it. So I forgot it until I was in the visitor room, where you have to ring the bell to be called in basically. And I was still disputing what to do about the situation in the visitor room, and luckily for me a nurse came by one of my of my unit, and I told her, please be alert, he's more awake than he was before or ever since the operation. She was like, okay, and I was basically happy. Because of the emergency, they told me I should call them in 2 hours, so they would tell me if I could go in again or not. And because I live quite close to the hospital, I decided to go home and just rest a little bit. After 2 hours, I called them. They told me no, the emergency is still going on, and I should call them in at least 2 more hours. So again, called them after 2 more hours, and then they told me again, no, still emergency, give us more time, 1 more hour, and then it was half an hour, and I think after 7 hours I was allowed back in. And it was quite depressing to get in there, because my son was laying there and he was quite motionless, so I suspected they put him under a little bit deeper, or they put him a little bit deeper into coma, so he wouldn't wake up and start any trouble, basically. So they could concentrate more on the other child, but there was no other child in our unit. There was only a stand with a candle and a stone, and so of course I realized the other child died. And you also saw the nurses who were really sad and worn out, and just the whole atmosphere was awful. The nurses didn't tell me anything, and I was like, don't need to bother them. I just sat beside my son and yeah, was like every mother, wishing him to be well again. But okay, that's another thing. Half an hour later, a doctor came in and he told me, or we're starting a conversation, and he started with, You probably already heard what happened. And I told him, I don't need to be told what happened. I can see that the other child died. And he was like, well, no, that's not what I meant. I meant your child almost died. And I was like, okay, what the heck? And I really can't recall what he told me at that point. But in my mind, it always played out as the other child was a really bad emergency, so they needed all hands on deck. And I suspect they didn't look for my child as much as he would have needed, which is totally understandable. I don't blame them at all for that. But shortly after the first child died, and that's what I can remember, they told me my child was in emergency and they had to reanimate him. But luckily for me, basically, my child survived. They reanimated him, and I can't tell you if there's any damage from that incident. I can't see any damage, but that doesn't mean there is none. But nobody can tell you if there will be or has been. What I want to take you out of this is the people, the nurses, they're humans and they do the best they can. And they are nurses because they want to help our, or in this case, our children or my child. They wanted to help him, but even they can fail. And I can't blame them for that. Maybe the case would have been different if he would have died. Maybe then I would have a completely different mindset. But as is, I'm not mad at them at all. And for me, it's totally understandable, and I'm only really glad and thankful that I could save him. Okay, so that's one of the days I had to live through, and I hope I touched you with my story, or I don't know how to say this. I'm really bad at ending these videos, so bye.